5 years ago, Alexander Grant, a cold and calculating millionaire CEO, walked out of a hospital room and never looked back. She had told him she was pregnant, that the child was his, but trust wasn't something Alexander gave eyes. In his world, love came second to ambition, and lies came dressed as sincerity. He remembered her tears, her trembling voice saying, "It's yours, Alex." He remembered how he'd turned away anyway. Now, 5 years later, fate decided to collect its debt. He was at a charity event when he saw a small boy run past him, laughing, the same shade of hazel eyes, the same dimples when he smiled. For a second, Alexander couldn't breathe. He saw himself, only smaller. And standing a few steps away was the woman he thought he'd forgotten. The one he'd broken. The city glittered beneath the rain, every drop reflecting the power and chaos that came with Alexander Grant's empire. From the top floor of the Grant Corporation, the young millionaire CEO stared out through the glass, his reflection as cold and sharp as the skyline itself. He had everything: money, control, respect, everything except peace. But tonight, peace wasn't on his schedule. The gala downstairs was filled with New York's elite laughter, champagne, and fake smiles. Alexander hated events like this, but his board insisted he make an appearance. To them, appearances mattered. To him, only results did. He adjusted his cup, straightened his tie, and stepped into the hall, unaware that the one person who had once broken through his armor was somewhere. In that same room, Amelia Hart, the woman he once loved, the woman he'd accused of betrayal, the woman he left behind 5 years ago, pregnant, crying, and alone. He hadn't thought of her name in years, at least, that's what he told himself. But every time he saw a child with brown eyes or heard a laugh that reminded him of her, his chest would tighten just enough to remind him that ghosts never truly leave. "Mr. Grant," one of his investors called out, breaking his thoughts, "we're ready for your toast." He forced a smile, lifted his glass, and gave his rehearsed speech about success and perseverance. Applause followed, but his eyes drifted toward the far end of the hall, toward the charity section where the event's sponsors were gathered. That's when he saw him. A small boy, no older than 4, running across the carpet, chasing soap bubbles blown by a volunteer. His laughter was bright, real, unfiltered. He bumped into a waiter, muttered a quick sorry, in the sweetest tone, and kept running. Alexander smiled faintly. Kids weren't something he understood, but there was something oddly familiar about this one. Then the boy looked up, hazel eyes, the same exact shade as his own. The world seemed to stop. For a second, Alexander forgot how to breathe. His glass trembled in his hand. That face, that expression, it was like looking at a smaller version of himself. And then, he saw her. Amelia. She was standing near the dessert table, her long hair pulled into a loose braid, wearing a simple blue dress that somehow made her stand out in a room full of diamonds. She looked different, stronger, maybe, but her eyes, those soft brown eyes, carried the same sadness he'd last seen in the hospital 5 years ago. The same day he'd destroyed her. Memories came rushing back like a storm. The hospital smell, the ultrasound image, her trembling voice, "Alex, it's yours." His cold reply, "I can't trust you, Amelia. Not after what you did." He hadn't even stayed to hear her cry. He'd turned his back, walked out, and buried himself in his empire. It was easier to chase money than to face pain. Now, seeing her again, his chest felt heavy with guilt. He took a hesitant step forward. "Amelia." Her head turned, and the moment their eyes met, the room disappeared. Shock flashed across her face, then pain, then the guarded expression of someone who had spent years rebuilding walls just to survive. "Alexander," she breathed, her voice soft but trembling. The boy ran to her and tugged at her hand. "Mommy, look, I caught a bubble." "Mommy." The word hit him harder than a punch. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. "Mommy." That meant, he glanced between her and the boy again. The resemblance was undeniable. The same eyes, same hair, even the same tiny dimple that appeared when he smiled. Who's the boy?" he finally asked, his voice low and strained. Her expression hardened. "You don't get to ask that." "Amelia," he said quietly, stepping closer. "Please, just tell me." But she cut him off sharply. "You lost the right to ask questions the day you walked out on me." The boy looked between them curiously. "Mommy, who's that man?" Her breath shook, but she forced a gentle smile for her son. "Just someone Mommy used to know, sweetheart." The boy nodded innocently and ran off toward the cotton candy stand, leaving an unbearable silence between the two adults. Alexander's throat felt dry. He looks just like me." "Don't flatter yourself. Amelia said bitterly. Not everything revolves around you, Alexander. But her eyes told a different story, a flicker of guilt, or maybe fear, that she quickly tried to hide. He swallowed hard. Is he mine? Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed her purse and started walking away. He followed. Amelia, please, I need to know. She turned, her voice rising for the first time. You needed to know 5 years ago, when I told you I was pregnant, when I begged you to listen. When I cried in that hospital bed, that's when you should have cared. People turned to stare, but neither of them noticed. Tears glistened in her eyes as she whispered, now it's too late. And then she walked away, leaving Alexander standing in the middle of the glittering ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of people, yet completely alone. He looked down at the small handprint of frosting on his sleeve. The boys, and for the first time in years, the unshakable millionaire CEO felt something he couldn't control: regret. The next morning, Alexander sat in his office, but the city skyline outside his window felt distant, like a painting he could no longer touch. For years, this view had been his proof of power. Every skyscraper below was a victory. Every deal signed was control, but today, all he could see was a little boy's face, those hazel eyes, that small dimple, that laugh. His son. The word echoed in his chest like a heartbeat. He couldn't concentrate. Every paper on his desk blurred together. His assistant knocked twice before entering. Mr. Grant, you have the Shanghai call in 5 minutes. He didn't look up. Cancel it. She froze. Sir, I said, cancel it. For the first time in years, Alexander Grant didn't care about business. He stood, grabbed his coat, and walked out, leaving a trail of confusion behind him. The address hadn't been easy to find. Amelia had changed her number, moved apartments, and even left her old hospital job. It took a single call to his private investigator to uncover what she'd spent years trying to hide. Brooklyn Public Library, children's section, volunteer schedule, every Saturday. He waited until the weekend. For 2 days, he rehearsed what he'd say, but nothing ever sounded right. I'm sorry felt too small for the damage he'd caused. When Saturday came, he found himself standing in front of the library door, heart pounding harder than it ever did before a merger or a press conference. He wasn't the CEO today. He was just a man terrified of the truth. He stepped inside. The scent of old paper and children's laughter filled the air. Rows of books surrounded him, sunlight streaming through tall windows. He heard her voice before he saw her, and that's when the little bird told the boy, even if you fall, you can always try again. He followed the sound, and there she was. Amelia sat cross-legged on a colorful rug, surrounded by a group of children. Her son sat beside her, clutching a toy truck, listening with wide, curious eyes. Alexander froze at the sight. She was smiling, a real smile this time, the one he used to see when she'd talk about her dreams. He'd forgotten how soft her voice could sound when she wasn't trying to hold back tears. He stood there, unable to move. The boy noticed him first. He turned, curiosity flashing in his big hazel eyes. Mommy, that man again. Amelia's smile faltered. She turned slowly, and their eyes met, her calm breaking instantly. Alexander, she whispered, standing up. Amelia, he said quietly, taking a step forward. I had to see you. Her son tugged her sleeve. Mommy, do you know him? She hesitated. Yes, sweetheart, someone from a long time ago. The boy looked at Alexander again, tilting his head. You look like me. The words hit him like a knife. Innocent, unfiltered truth from a child who didn't even understand what it meant. Alexander knelt down, his voice trembling. Yeah, I guess I do. Amelia's eyes softened for a second, then hardened again. You shouldn't be here. I had to come, he said quietly. You didn't answer me that night. I need to know. Know what? She asked bitterly. If he's mine, she exhaled shakily, glancing at her son. This isn't the place. Then tell me where, he pleaded. Please, Amelia. I'm not leaving until you do. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, she handed the toy truck back to her son and whispered something to the librarian before leading Alexander outside. The cool autumn wind hit them as they stepped onto the sidewalk. The silence between them was thick, heavy, and years overdue. Finally, she turned to him. Why now? He looked at her helplessly. Because I saw him. Because I couldn't stop seeing him. Because when I looked at that boy, I saw myself. Her jaw tightened. And what? You suddenly want to play father after 5 years. I made a mistake, he said hoarsely. I thought you lied. I thought. She laughed bitterly. You thought I cheated. You thought I was just another woman trying to trap you? That's what you said. Remember? He winced. He remembered every word. The anger, the pride, the fear. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I see that now." Amelia shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "You can't just show up and erase what happened. Alexander, you left me when I needed you the most. I lost everything, my job, my home, my family's trust because I chose to keep him. I raised him alone. Every sleepless night, every hospital bill, every question he asked about his father, I faced it alone." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, the woman who had held herself together so fiercely seemed ready to break. Alexander stepped closer. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please, let me be part of his life. Let me make it right." Her eyes met his, filled with pain and disbelief. "You can't just decide to care now, Alex. You walked away from me, from him. I didn't know you didn't want to know," she interrupted. "That's the difference." He stood there, silent, unable to defend himself. Then, her son came running out of the library, holding his drawing. "Mommy, look what I made." He held up a picture, stick figures holding hands. A woman, a little boy, and beside them, a tall man with brown hair and a blue suit. Amelia froze. "Sweetheart, who's that?" The boy grinned. "That's him." He pointed at Alexander. "He looks like me, so he must be my daddy." Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She knelt and hugged her son tightly, whispering something he couldn't hear. Alexander's throat burned. His eyes glistened as he whispered, "He deserves to know the truth." Amelia didn't look at him, just whispered back, "The truth broke me once. I won't let it break him too." She took her son's hand and started to walk away. But just before she turned the corner, the boy looked back and smiled. That same little half-smile Alexander used to give when he wanted to say thank you but didn't know how. And in that moment, the man who once thought money could fix everything, realized that the one thing he truly wanted was the only thing he couldn't buy: his family. Days turned into weeks, but Alexander couldn't shake off that image, the little boy's eyes, the drawing, the smile. He tried to bury himself in work, but every board meeting, every phone call, every deal felt hollow. He had built empires, but the one thing he truly wanted, the family he destroyed, slipped further away each time he hesitated. Finally, one Friday evening, his assistant entered his office, voice trembling. "Sir, you asked me to keep you informed about Ms. Amelia and her son." He looked up instantly. "What happened?" "She's at St. Mary's Hospital." "The boy, he's sick." Alexander didn't wait for details. He grabbed his keys and ran. When he arrived, the hospital's fluorescent lights felt colder than ever. The halls echoed with soft footsteps and distant monitors. He found her in the pediatric ward, sitting beside her son's bed. The boy's small hand lay limp in hers. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "What are you doing here?" He stopped in the doorway, chest heaving. "You didn't tell me he was sick." She looked away. "You lost the right to know a long time ago." He stepped closer, voice shaking. "Please, Amelia, let me help." She rose from the chair, fury breaking through her exhaustion. "You think you can fix this with money? This isn't another business deal." "I know that," he shouted, then lowered his voice, his control breaking. "I just can't lose him before I ever get to know him." Her anger wavered. For a moment, she saw the man she once loved, not the CEO, but Alexander, the one who used to laugh with her over burnt pancakes and late-night dreams. The doctor entered quietly. "Mrs. Hayes, we're monitoring him closely. He has a heart condition, not critical yet, but he'll need surgery soon." Alexander turned to the doctor. "Whatever it costs, whatever he needs, I'll cover it." Amelia's lips trembled. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," he said softly. "Because this time, I'm not walking away." The next few days changed everything. He stayed in the hospital, refusing to leave. He brought breakfast every morning, read bedtime, stories at night, and when the boy asked who he was, Amelia finally whispered, "He's your father." The little boy blinked, confused. "You mean, like in the stories?" Alexander smiled through tears. "Yeah, buddy, like in the stories." He sat beside him that night, holding his tiny hand, and for the first time in years, he felt something real, something money couldn't buy or replace. Weeks later, after the surgery, the doctor came out smiling. "He's going to be okay." Amelia broke down, sobbing into her hands. Alexander pulled her close without thinking, his voice trembling. "He's strong, just like his mom." She didn't resist. For the first time since he'd broken her heart, she let herself lean on him. When the boy finally woke up, Alexander was there. "Hey champ," he whispered. You scared us. The little boy smiled weakly. Did you stay here the whole time? Every second, Alexander said. I wasn't leaving again. The boy grinned. Then can we go home when I'm better? Like, all of us. Alexander looked at Amelia. Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded slowly. A few months later, the three of them stood in front of a small seaside house, white fences, sunflowers by the porch, laughter echoing inside. Amelia set the boy's backpack down and turned to Alexander. You don't have to do all this. He smiled gently. I know, but I want to. She studied him, unsure if she could believe it, until he knelt beside their son and helped him with his kite, laughing when the wind caught it. For the first time, she saw him not as the man who left, but the man who came back different. That evening, as the sunset painted the ocean gold, Alexander turned to her. I can't undo what I did. But if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm not that man anymore. She hesitated, heart trembling, and then she whispered, You already have. He took her hand, and this time, he didn't let go. Their son ran toward them, kite flying high above, his laughter filling the sky. And in that moment, Alexander finally understood. Redemption didn't come through money, power, or apology. It came through love, quiet and unconditional. He had lost everything once. Now, he'd found everything again in the small hand that held his. And the woman who once thought he'd never return. Sometimes love doesn't end, it just hides behind pain, waiting for the right moment to be seen again. Alexander thought he'd lost everything the day he walked away, but fate had other plans. One small heartbeat, one pair of familiar eyes, changed everything. Can forgiveness truly heal what pride destroyed? Watch this emotional journey of love, regret, and redemption where the Millionaire CEO learns the true cost of walking away. If you believe that family is worth fighting for, hit like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who still believes in second chances.